Right, good afternoon everybody and welcome to the Cabinet meeting. Let's make a start. Do we have any apologies at all?
I haven't received any, Chair, no.
Okay, well I will put in one apology for Councillor Candade's unable to attend. Good. I think we've got several declarations of interest this afternoon. Would people like to indicate declarations of interest? Gail?
Right. We've got dispensation on item 6 as a council tenant. That was received last year and was continuous for 4 years. On items 10 and 13, I'm a director of Norwich Building Limited, so I will be withdrawing from the meeting for both of those papers and won't take part in any discussion. And lastly, on items 9 and... No, not which one was it? On items 9 and 12, as a director of Norwich North Building Limited, in this case it doesn't preclude me from taking part in the debate and voting. And lastly, I am a member of the shareholder panel for NCSL. How's that?
Comprehensive. Councillor King.
Very similar, I'm also council tenant, director of Norwich MPS, and also a member of the shareholder panel for NCSL.
Right, and Kate.
Thank you, Chair. Item 6, special dispensation as a council tenant, and then item 9 will be withdrawing, but that item is non-executive director of NCSL.
Thank you very much, and I also, item 6, as a council tenant, I'm also a member of the shareholder panel. And Lucy, same thing? Yeah. Right, any more on these? Okay, thank you very much. So item 3, we have one public question from Charlotte Chamberlain. Thank you very much, Ms. Chamberlain, for joining us this afternoon and for your question. So if you would like to ask your question now, you'll have a response from the relevant portfolio holder, cabinet member.
Thank you. With headlines suggesting that energy bills could increase by as much as 50% when the price cap was raised in April, a lot of Norwich residents, including me, are worried about the impact on our finances. I'm part of a local group called Green New Deal Norwich, which is looking at how we as a city can retrofit our homes to stop them leaking of heat and transition away from reliance on gas. This needs to happen across the country, but there is a serious shortage of investment, skills and awareness. Will the Council commit funds to addressing this challenge in its upcoming budget?
Thank you very much, Ms. Chamberlain. Councillor Mahound.
Thank you very much for your question. We are aware of the challenge that rising energy bills represent for many, and we continue to do all we can to improve housing and help residents access appropriate support and advice. We have been awarded £3.1 million from central government to retrofit approximately 200 private sector homes in the city with insulation and solar systems. Overall, this will save residents £250,000 a year. We also utilise other external sources of funding, including ECO, which helps private sector households access funding for loft and cavity wall insulation. Over 1,500 homes have benefited from this scheme. We have invested £129 million into our housing stock over the past 6 years, and we have committed £18.5 million to maintaining and improving the condition of existing housing. All of this is an important part of our wider work supporting residents who face financial challenges. For example, our council tax reduction scheme offers those in need a 100% reduction.
So, Ms. Chamberlain, you're invited to ask one brief supplementary question arising out of the answer you've received.
Thank you. I welcome that obviously Norwich City Council is beginning to address the retrofit challenge. but I think it's probably a tiny fraction of what's probably going to be needed. We wonder whether you'll consider following the example of cities like Manchester and Brighton, which have set up task forces specifically for retrofit to help solve the retrofit challenge, which of course is enormous. Thank you.
Yeah, you're quite right, it's an enormous challenge. Our estimate is that to retrofit all private homes in Norwich that are currently below EPC grade C, just with wall and loft insulation, it's going to be somewhere in the region of 295 to 511 million, and that figure goes up many times if you're talking about whole house approach to the very high standards. So these costs are clearly prohibitive to us within our budget and everything else we need to achieve the services we provide. Yet we're always up for looking at models that other councils and areas have done. We've had some preliminary conversations about those sorts of things with officers, and we don't want to leave stones unturned where we can. But yeah, we can't really do this on our own. We're largely reliant on government funds, funding opportunities that can be relatively small in scale, specific, but competitive. We need long-term sustainable solutions, need the government to play its part and provide that strategy. So to sum up, yes, we're happy to look into other models of finding funding and similar.
Thanks very much, Councillor Hampton. Thank you very much for your time this afternoon. Okay, let's go on to item 4, which is the minutes of our last cabinet meeting. Any amendments relating to accuracy? Okay, could we agree those minutes, please indicate, cabinet members? Thank you very much. Okay, and let's move on to item 5. I just want to make a couple of preliminary comments about items 5 and 6 in particular. These are obviously going to be subject to full debate at the Budget Council meeting taking place in a couple of weeks' time. The plan and the budgets have gone to the Scrutiny Committee, and there are some recommendations that flow from those presentations to scrutiny. So clearly people can discuss at some length in presenting these reports, but I would suggest that for this evening, being concise, given that we will have a full and comprehensive debate at full council, would probably justify us being on the more concise side this evening. Okay, so with that introductory plea, I suppose, can we just go on to the item 5, which is in my name. I have Councillor Beth Jones.
Thank you. Can I propose an amendment to the corporate plan on page 35 of the agenda? That is to replace the new and updated Biodiversity Strategy to provide clarity on the standards of private landlords and agents as needed to provide private occupation to review and accelerate the delivery of the Norwich Biodiversity Charter, provides clarity on the standards of private landlords and agents as needed to provide private occupation in line with the improvement plan for regulatory services, review and update the Charter itself, and also to amend the delivery ongoing to June 2020, from June 2022 and update Charter update by December 2024. I think just to clarify the importance of replacing this.
Absolutely. Cabinet members, are you happy to accept that amendment? Please indicate. Okay, unanimous. Thank you very much. So I'll go into the body of the report, which starts on page 13. So this is a new corporate plan, and it draws on previous work we have done on the corporate plan, which came to an end with this new model. It's one of the recommendations is absorbing, as it were, into this new corporate plan the work that we've been doing around COVID recovery. One of the first councils in the country to have a COVID recovery plan, and to include the work of that range of activities as part of an annual report of that new corporate plan and an annual progress report. So just to take you through a few of the key points, and can I first of all commend the body of the report and the design, which lays out very, very clearly and in a very well designed way the salient features of this corporate plan and its objectives. And what we know is it has been strongly informed, as actually was the previous corporate plan, by the work of the Norwich 2040 Vision Partnership and the impacts of COVID and the response to it. Now, this is a high-level document. It does not contain everything that we are doing as a council, and we are a very active council. And there are a series of technical appendices which indicate the ambition to achieve KPIs, key performance indicators, but also time frame within which key priority activities will be delivered as part of our overall service delivery. It is a euphemism to say we live in a changing environment, and clearly this corporate plan, as with previous corporate plans, has to be flexible enough to take account of change, and that's why each year we have and we will continue to make amendments and change some of the key priority areas in some cases if circumstances justify that. We've had some very helpful input from the Scrutiny Committee, and I will be referring to the recommendations and the response to those recommendations on page 18 of this report. And what we will do is we will alter the papers that go to the full council meeting if we agree to the changes and the responses to those changes which have come from scrutiny. The financial and resources issues, and of course, the reason why we have a budget council, the key policy document first, is that what we're doing with the budget is ensuring that we have the resources in place to be able to deliver what those political priorities are. And so these recommendations which are going forward to full council are the recommendations of the administration, but informed heavily by extensive consultation. There is a mechanism in place on paragraph 17, which is a corporate planning cycle. And if there are new things, resource allocations within the budget that has been set or will be set in a couple of weeks' time, all those will be tested against business plans in terms of making sure that the resources are in place, the business case is sound, and the delegations are in place to make that happen. So that's the brief overview. If I can turn you now, please, to page 18, you'll see that we have recommendations from the Scrutiny Meeting which took place on the 20th of January. So as they're listed very helpfully, the recommendation, the notes arising from that recommendation and suggested amendment or agreed wording, you can see that those are listed in the third column. So we found these very, very helpful items of discussion. So as they're laid out, we are minded to accept the following amendments and to carry those forward to the council meeting and for the papers for the full council meeting in a couple of weeks' time. I think probably, James, at this point I should bring you in because we've got some recommendations which are sort of scattered through, well, located strategically through the papers tonight to refer to specific areas of your investigations. Over to you, James.
Thank you very much, Chair. Would you just like me to talk through the Appendix 1 in essence?
Yes, I'd appreciate your response to Appendix, the appendices on page 18.
Yeah, well, thank you for that. As you'll see, there are 5 recommendations there, and I'm very pleased to see that some of those are being minded for consideration. You'll see that, I'll just go through these one by one. Our recommendation 1 is to amend the wording to listen to communities and use their views in decision making. So the current wording is listen to our communities and use their views in our decision making. So it's a subtle change there. We have another one, amend on M2, amend wording to work with partners to increase sustainable transport and improve air quality. The current wording is work with partners to move towards sustainable transport and improve air quality. Third recommendation is those KPIs that are rollovers of existing targets due to upcoming reviews could be indicated as such for clarity. And see that that's being accepted as well. And then there's a couple of others around KPIs. Recommendation 3 is to include previous KPIs and performance documents to understand if the council is achieving its targets. And the note there is that it's believed that it's currently adequately covered with the current measures in place. And finally, to include the KPI linked to the council inquiry service. And again, no change to the text of the plans as being considered by Cabinet today, as those are considered to be adequately covered.
So you'll appreciate there's been a full and thorough look at those recommendations. And we thank Scrutiny Committee for the work we've done with Dr. Forster.
And actually, what I should have said was, although it wasn't a recommendation from the Scrutiny, I'd like to thank Councillor Jones for her amendment, because I actually asked a question at Scrutiny around the private rented and the date there, because it looked like the corporate plan was saying that the council will be sitting on its laurels until 2025, which we all know isn't the case, and so I think it's quite important that that is now being changed.
Okay, Cabinet colleagues, any questions or comments? Any reports? No? Lucy, anything on this?
Thank you. I'd like to highlight that the corporate plan comes at a point where we're expecting a £700 increase in energy bills, which in fact everyone. But if you look at M3 in Untitled Chapter 32, so the Norwich has the infrastructure and housing needs to be a successful city. There are 6 points, nothing specific on energy efficiency. So I'd like to ask a question really, do we have to actively manage and invest in our housing revenue account homes that are safe, well maintained and provide modern facilities? Do we have and provide energy efficiency? We're coming to a point where this has to be done. Developing energy efficiency is a really huge priority, and my question is, can we have that?
I think the question would be is whether in the whole of the corporate plan priorities, those issues are covered in an adequate and comprehensive way. And I suppose the point I was making about this document is you've got a high-level document and you've got detailed appendices with the actions and the resources that flow from that. I'm going to ask Councillor Hampton if there's any comments you want to make on that.
I completely support where you're coming from. I think the elements are there within it. I wouldn't be against making it more explicit. There is still scope to. I think it's an important point, but I do think most of the component bits to what you're saying are included somewhere, the environment element, the kind of social element, but if we want to put it together, support that.
Okay, well, what we could do, yes,
So on page 44, it does say, linked to the asset management strategy and capital programme of and stock condition surveys, identifying and create opportunities for regeneration of HIA homes. That's on page 44. So I think some of that is covered off within that as well. I mean, I don't know whether an officer might want to comment as well.
what I'm going to suggest is that if that is an issue of concern to you, Lucy, you raise it as an amendment at the part of the Budget Council, which looks at the corporate plan. I'm not inclined to open up a discussion about it this afternoon, so there's an opportunity for you to be able to do that. Okay. Any further questions, comments? Okay. So we have recommendations. At the front of the report on page 13, we are minded to accept the recommendations that the Scrutiny Committee have put forward, saving 2 of those, and subject to those amendments and the one that Councillor Jones has introduced, can we agree those recommendations, please, as amended to the corporate plan? Thank you very much. Okay, let's now move on then to the item 6, which is the Council's budget and medium-term financial strategy 22-23. Councillor Kendall.
Thank you very much, Chair. It's again this year my honour to present these budget papers. Papers present the proposed revenue budget for financial year 22-23, the General Fund and Housing Revenue Account, alongside the proposed capital programme and Treasury Management Strategy. Setting a balanced budget will continue to be a challenge for the Council over the next few years, coming on the back of a decade of austerity, rising demand for services and the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic. The Government's financial settlement covered only the financial year 22-23, with the Government again implementing a roll-forward finance settlement. This means further delays in the Government's longer-term reforms to local government finance and makes financial planning over the medium term very difficult. To help the Council live within its means, the budget includes proposals for a 3.2 million of savings and additional income of 1.4 million, which is equivalent to a further 2.1 to be taken from Council reserves. Millions, of course, 2.1 million. Although it is proposed that the Council tax increases by 1.99% next year, equivalent to £5.47 a year for a banded property, the budget also retains the current Council tax reduction scheme, which provides relief for up to 100% on council tax bills for those with the lowest incomes. Pressure on the Council's finances will continue over the coming year. A further estimated 9.95 million needing to be saved by the financial year 26-27, due to the amount of funding provided to local councils being adequate to keep pace with the demand for local services. Challenges will require cost-cutting service reviews to drive forward the saving options for future years. To support this, the budget includes a £600,000 contribution to the Council's Business Change Reserve to support the new service review programme. Alongside the delivery of day-to-day services, the proposed budget sets out a plan for investing £29.3 million in critical infrastructure for the city over the next year, which forms part of a total of £45.8 million for government investments over the next 5 years. Included within next year's budget is £11.4 million for the key town deal fund programmes such as the public realm improvements, a digital hub to provide start-up and grow-on space for the tech sector, and investment in the halls. The Housing Revenue Account budget includes a proposed rent increase of 4.1% to enable the Council to continue to invest in existing and new homes. This investment is reflected in the capital programme, or a proposed 5-year programme totalling 171.6 million is being proposed. This will deliver significant investments in existing housing, as well as 200 new homes. So this budget is a budget of investment, and once again we've managed to avoid major cuts in council services, which sadly many other authorities, including the county council, have been unable to do. I think it's one we owe a debt to our officers for the excellent work that they have done and the good management of our council finances by this Labour administration. And the fact that we have frankly ignored some of the advice from the Green Party over the last few years in regard to the commercial property investment portfolio, which has been highly successful, which they imposed, has also been a factor that I can actually come to you today with such a positive budget in this council.
Thank you very much, Councillor Kendrick. Any questions or comments from colleagues? Yes, there's a big housing element to this, so would you like to speak to that?
Thank you. I will keep it brief. There's a lot of recommendations relating to the HRA on page 58. I fully support those. The paper covers the expenditure and income plans relating to the ownership and management of the council's social housing stock. It's a very detailed paper, and I have no intention of going through it line by line. You'll be very pleased to know. The HRA is in a relatively stable position at the moment, but as time goes on, there will be future pressures and competing priorities. We are an ambitious council, and we want to continue to build good quality new homes for social rent. We need to maintain our existing stock, and we want to improve our existing stock. We now have a housing delivery team in place to drive forward a pipeline of new housing sites. We have acknowledged issues in relation to health and safety and compliance in our homes, which we are working hard to rectify. From the 1st of April, the building repairs and maintenance services will be transferred to our own company, NCSL, and property services will come back into the council. This will most certainly be a very positive step forward. We need to meet the challenges of implementing the draft building safety bill, the social housing white paper, and of improving our council homes in line with our zero carbon ambitions. The HRA is forecast to make a surplus of income over expenditure of 0.246 million in 22-23, and it is proposed to use this surplus along with 6.096 million of existing reserves to fund capital investment in new social housing. The needs for social housing within the city will certainly not diminish. After careful consideration, we have taken the decision to recommend a 4.1% rent increase. This equates to an average increase of £3.30 per week, with support available for those on low incomes through the operation of housing benefit or in some cases universal credit. Not an easy decision, and one which we debated at the tenant involvement panel, but necessary to fund all of our future plans and the challenges which we face. Paragraph 4.42 gives a summary of what the capital programme for 22-23 will provide. It could be the new build, it could be the new kitchens and bathrooms, it could be the door entry systems that you're interested in, it could be disabled adaptations, all things which make such a positive difference to our residents' lives. It could be the estate aesthetics, where the many varied projects include such things as pathways being levelled in Wilberforce Road in Custance Lane, where drying areas have been resurfaced in Vauxhall Street, where new communal benches have been provided in Gildencroft, where new bin stores have been installed in Grazingate, and many more local projects which give residents a sense of pride in the area in which they live. I should perhaps at this stage just point out, I think, a small typo in the last bullet point of that paragraph. I think Sean probably know what I'm talking about. It says 0.15 million estate aesthetics programme. I think it should read 0.75 million. The correct figure is actually within the chart on page 157. So at this stage, I just need to thank all of the officers involved in the preparation of these papers for all of their hard work during what has most certainly been one of the most challenging years that I've known. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Gail. Any other colleagues want to raise any points? Officers? No? Okay. Lucy, have you got any questions?
Yes, thank you. So thank you for your work on the project and the circumstances and in the face of lack of long-term thinking by central government, which makes it so difficult for councils as plan. We have to be clever about managing our money, and the only way we can do this is by our investment. So I wanted to ask, it was stated at the last Scrutiny Meeting that there's never been a commitment to explore investing more in renewable energy, commercial investment, to deliver a return to the council. I wanted to ask, is this a lack of political direction to invest in a renewable investment portfolio? For example, if full funding the local council to invest in solar farms, for example, can you make an assurance now that we are committed to investing in renewable energy as a commercial investment, just to be able to give Box the political steer they need so we can invest in the future we want to see?
Just on that scrutiny recommendation, I'm putting an amendment which is to ensure there is continued political commitment to investing in renewable or green energy projects. I think it does not reflect the accuracy of what the council does in this area, so I'm disappointed by that implication. But Councillor Hampton, did you want to comment at all?
Yeah, Paul might like to in a second as well because of the commercial investment aspect. I don't recall there being a context where we've ruled this out, so we wouldn't look at it. Obviously, we have to be wary of budget challenges and the need to, get that return. But I don't recall, and you may be able to challenge that, us saying it's not something we would consider.
Yes, Councillor Kenny.
Yes, I can concur. There is no political opposition to these particular programs, but what we need is a good business case for a particular project, and we will certainly examine it in a positive and encouraging light.
Bill?
Just a couple there was a couple of other amendments suggested at scrutiny. I didn't know we were going to cover those on.
I'll cover those in a moment.
Yeah, okay.
Well, we can continue the discussion sort of, but I'll come back to James. I think you've got the list in front of you, haven't you?
I have, yes, thank you.
Budget scrutiny recommendations.
Very helpful it is too, considering I wasn't actually at that meeting, so I'm approaching this. It's new to me. But we've obviously covered the first recommendation and dealt with that. The second one is where financially and legally viable fit the lowest carbon emitting heating systems in council properties. Now, I assume that relates to page 147 of the papers today and the 824 new heating systems in the boiler upgrades. And so there is a note here, the Cabinet minded to consider where financially and legally viable in conjunction with a fabric-first approach, where the property type allows for upgrade the thermal performance of the fabric, fit the lowest carbon emitting heating system in council properties, where fabric upgrade isn't possible and low carbon heat sources aren't feasible or will make operation unaffordable for residents, then gas boilers will be fitted. But pipework and radiators or other emitters will be upgraded to allow for future transition to low carbon alternatives. So taking the scrutiny recommendation and developing it. And then there was another recommendation related to a piece of work that the scrutiny committee is currently doing around bins, common bins and fly tipping. So the recommendation was ensure there is budget available to carry out any recommendations of the fly tipping and common bins task and finish group. And the response to that is any recommendations considered by the fly tipping and task and finish group will give consideration of costs and funding options available. If funding cannot be identified within existing budgets, officers will facilitate the appropriate decision pathway to identify alternative funding sources and approvals required. That is what I have in front of me.
And we had a very extensive discussion on all of these issues, and those are the responses from the Cabinet. I'd like to be able then to include those recommendations, so ensuring, just to remind ourselves, ensuring that there is continued political commitment in renewable and green energy projects. Okay with that? Right, so, is there a problem? Yes, it was we thought you were speaking a bit quietly, Lucy, but it's your microphone. Okay. Right. So, are we happy to accept, first of all, let's just do this, the scrutiny recommendations? We've got those, can you put hands up for that? Thank you. And can we now absorb those, as it were, into the recommendations of pages 57 to 59, which will then go forwards for Council for consideration? Okay, could you please indicate? Thank you very much. Right, item 7, Council Tax Reduction Scheme, page 211 to 222. Councillor Kennedy.
Thank you very much, Chair. Well, once again, it is my pleasure to introduce to this Cabinet proposals to maintain our 100% council tax reduction scheme. We are one of the very few local authorities in the country to continue with this, although I'm very glad to say that the Labour-controlled Ipswich Borough Council has also moved towards a 100% council tax reduction scheme. The only other authority I can confirm that has a similar policy will be Stroud District Council of Gloucestershire, although that is obviously not a comprehensive list. I often include one poignant story. It's of a friend I know, the same age as myself, who, due to 63, who due to a severe heart disease is unable to work and has to live on the pittance of the universal credit. Yet, because he lives in Broadland, he has to pay 25% of his council tax. And frankly, if he lived in Brighton, where there's a green administration, he wouldn't be much better off. He'd still have to pay 20% of the council tax. So it's 25% in Tory Broadland and 20% in Green Brighton. But if he lived here in Norwich, he would get 100% council tax reduction. And I'm sure that will be a help to him, as it is a help to so many people who are struggling in our society on the lowest wages and benefits that we provide. So I just once again, with great pride, that I say that this Labour administration will continue with its 100% council tax reduction scheme policy.
Thank you very much, Councillor Kendrick. Any comments from Cabinet colleagues, officers? And let's then go on to Lucy. Yeah. So, sorry, I'll take Kate first and then Lucy.
I just realised I might just have an interest in that item.
Right. Okay. We'll make sure that's limited. Yes, please.
I wouldn't ever want to address personal specifics in the room. Generally, there's a view that councillors don't have an interest in the setting of the council tax for the authority of which they're a member, and the local council tax reduction scheme effectively flows into that. So we wouldn't generally consider a councillor that may be impacted by this to have an interest.
Okay. Useful to know. Thank you, Leah. So you do have an interest, to clear in this case. So that's good. Any other cabinet members? No, Lucy.
Just wanted to confirm that we support the council tax reduction scheme fully, and Norwich has done really well to continue the 100% reduction. I wanted to ask about the practical implications of the recently announced £150 off council tax, how that's going to work, how will we make sure that we don't pay what the government's supposed to pay, and what the practical implications are.
So the implications of the people who are within this, where my understanding is that there will be some announcements by government in relation to this group of people. Annabelle?
Yeah, if you don't mind, Chair, we'll come back to members on exactly how it works. The team are working through all the guidance that's coming through. But as we've seen throughout this year, we quite often get public announcements from central government that we then have to work through and get the detail of. But we are doing that, the team are working hard on that. As soon as we've got our approach agreed, we'll let you know.
The rebates for everybody on council tax ATD. So not necessarily people who benefit from council tax support, so it's everybody in those council tax bands.
So we wait with interest the practicalities of the government announcement. Okay, so can we then go to the recommendations on pages 211, please? All those in favour? Okay, unanimously passed. And so let's now go on to item 8, which is the award of a concessionary contract for delivery of tenor centre operations in Norwich. I'm just minded to say to people that anybody who wants to ask a question on this is about the procurement process. It's not about any wider issues. I won't take any questions outside of that procurement framework. Over to you, Matt.
Thank you, Alan. I'll be brief as you requested. I think the paper clearly identifies the process that we'll be following, ensuring that all procurement regulations are met, and I look forward to it being completed as soon as possible, and tenants continuing at these 6 locations across the city.
Okay, thank you very much. Concise and to the point. Any questions or comments from Cabinet members? James, any questions on the procurement issue?
Thank you. My only question relates to the fact that this is a delegating award of the contracts to the Executive Director and the portfolio holder. When that delegated contract is awarded, can I just get clarification that members will be given the full details of that delegated decision? Had the decision been made this evening, obviously we would have the papers in front of us, but will we get those, and does that then fall within the usual decision-making parameters around further scrutiny, etc.? Thank you.
Yes, we usually issue a decision notice when a delegated contract decision is made, and that's part of our normal procedure. I wouldn't see it sitting outside that.
Yep. We have that assurance. Lucy?
Yeah, thank you. In procurement terms, what is the baseline the increase is set against, and will the tender specify that?
Okay, that would be an officer question. Do we have someone who wants to pick that up? Simon?
Yes, thank you, Chair. We'll take the baseline as where we are currently with the old contract, and then we'll be setting the new targets with the new provider.
Okay, thank you very much. Right, can we accept the recommendations on page 223, please? Indicate. Thank you very much. Right, so now we go on to item 9 and the Norwich City Services Limited Business Plan. This falls into 2 parts, an above the line and a below the line element. Delighted to welcome Hannah and Anne, Chair and Chief Executive, for this as part of the meeting. Thank you very much for coming along. Councillor Kendrick, you're going to start with the above the line report on page 227.
Thank you, Chair. Following the successful incorporation of the Council's new wholly owned company on the 9th of June 2020, the company is asked to approve the NCSL business plan covering the financial years 22 to 25. On the 1st of April, the company will deliver both environmental and building maintenance services. Ground maintenance services is the second major service transfer, and services are mainly focused around the provision of reactive maintenance service for Norwich City Council's housing stock. Services will include routine repairs and maintenance, major and minor repairs, voids and heating repairs. A reactive and responsive service will also be provided for commercial properties owned by Norwich City Council. The business plan reiterates the strategic objectives for the company, which align with the Council's corporate plan and celebrates the significant success achieved in the first full year of operation. The shareholder has agreed with the company to proactively work together during the next financial year to evaluate two financial objectives detailed within the formal recommendations. To achieve will support the Council's balance in its medium-term financial strategy by returning the net profits to the Council. There is one typo, and with a very, very large yellow sticker, to point out where it is. If you look at page, I'm sure everyone has spotted this already, by the way. If you look at page 232, if you look at service performance risk, it says NCS fails to provide. Well, it should, of course, be NCLS. NCSLs. Of course, my only reaction to that is, what the hell was going on there? Thank you very much. So just to go on to the recommendations, the report includes endorses the NCSLS business plan for the financial years 22-25 on behalf of Norwich City Council as a shareholder. The two new shareholders' objectives for NCSL are detailed below. The company to return a 4 to 5% net profit by year 4 of each of the main council contracts, which equates to the equivalent revenue stream of approximately £300,000 in the financial year 24-25, and a further £500,000 in 25-26. Incorporated into the 23-24 medium-term financial strategy, refreshed and NCLS business plan during financial years 23 to 26 if approved. The company to develop a financial strategy option paper for shareholder in Q3, which will consider how the company can become financially independent and not rely on the council to provide investment to the council's capital programme or replacement of existing equipment required to deliver contracted services. Therefore, I ask the Cabinet to endorse the recommendations as presented in this report. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Paul. Now, of course, we can't take these recommendations, nor can we take the recommendations of Scrutiny Committee until we've gone below the line to look at the business plan. So what I'm proposing is that we take the exempt item, which is item 12. We have that discussion about the commercial sensitive elements of the business plan. That was the procedure we followed when we took this to Scrutiny Committee. We will then come back above the line, and then we will consider the recommendations and any points that people want to raise at that stage, and we'll pick up the scrutiny issues there. So, Leonie, if we can go below the line, please. We need to have a vote to exclude the public. Can we vote on that? Yes, it's been agreed. Good. So there'll just be a short pause, I think, while we the recommendations, and including those from scrutiny. James?
Can I just query a point actually? Obviously not being present at the scrutiny, one of the recommendations refers us to the risk register, which is below the line. Are you happy for the recommendation itself to be discussed above the line?
I think that's okay.
So we're not going into the detail, it's just the principle of the recommendation.
Yes, that's fine. I think that's okay. Leah, you okay with that?
Yes, and obviously we probably just want to check that NCS have no objection given to their commercial sensitivity as well.
Yeah, I'm 100% fine with that.
So perhaps we'll get the ball rolling, unless there's any points in my guidelines, any comments any of my cabinet colleagues would like to make at this stage. Let's go on then, if there are not at this point, let's go on to the recommendations from scrutiny about the business plan.
Thank you, Chair. There were 3 recommendations from the Scrutiny Committee. The first was to include biodiversity as one of NCSL's main objectives. The second was on the risk register, company 9 risk, severe weather event. This should be expanded to take account of changes to work practices and schedules as a result of climate change by listing the effects of this. And the third recommendation was to ask the board to benchmark the environmental standards of NCSL against other companies in the field. Thank you. So thank you both to Hannah and Anne for being present at the Scrutiny Committee where I wasn't, but I think that was beneficial to you.
Okay, let me just run through our responses to those recommendations. So the reference to a biodiversity plan is one of the company's main objectives. A new biodiversity strategy is published in June by the Council, and as colleagues will know, the work of the company tracks the corporate plan of the Council and its priorities. So essentially what is embedded in the company's work is a biodiversity strategy, which will be informed, I have to say, by the work that you're doing. Clearly you have a key role to play in this and to shape and develop that strategy as time goes by. So the feeling is that we do have a biodiversity strategy embedded in the corporate plan, and the key objectives of the company is to work within the corporate plan and the work of the 2040 Vision Group. In relation to the risk register, clearly that also is framed in part by the corporate risk register, which comes to Cabinet on an annual basis. But I think the proposal from scrutiny is extremely broadly drawn. I think the view is that being able to respond to a severe weather event, which of course may well be a product of the climate and of climate change, means that is understood, and the risk responses to that reflect how the organisation will address those issues. Clearly, if there are new factors that come into play which affect the operation of the company in relation to climate change issues, then that risk element can be adjusted. As we know with all our risk registers, they are not static documents, they are living documents that take account of real-world external and internal events. And then the third one, to ask the board to benchmark the environmental standards of the company against other companies in the field. The priority, of course, is to achieve the range of objectives that the shareholders working with the company have set down, and that the company, I know this from the work that Hannah and Anne do, looking for best practice working in that sector, there will always be opportunities to have access to other ideas and to share the ideas that as a new company you are introducing. You know, for example, you may well be encouraging other companies to pay the real living wage because you're an exemplar in that area. So we felt that there was sufficient opportunity to benchmark, to work against targets and priorities set by the shareholder panel. So with those, so on that basis, we think that these recommendations valuable in terms of getting us just to think through and to test ourselves against the propositions that they set. There is that work is in hand or is being done. Okay. Right, Lucy.
Thanks. Going on to a different topic on this item though, just can I ask a question about looking at the vacancies on the website? There are clearly quite a high number of vacancies in the CSL at the moment. I wonder if you could give a bit more detail on the current situation in terms of how the terms and conditions are compared to other companies in the city, and how they're benchmarked, the salaries, are they competitive, and how can we attract and retain the staff we need?
Okay. You respond to this, Hannah?
Yeah, of course. We have got a number of vacancies at the moment. Some of those are seasonal related. We know we've got peaks at the moment and some vacancies that are more difficult to recruit to than others. Specifically, we found that within arborists, so the climbing arborist sector has been quite difficult to actually recruit to. In terms of benchmarking against other companies within the Norwich arena, that's not a specific exercise that's been undertaken. We do our own benchmarking, but generally against other local authorities where we've got data and information that we can get through. It's been done on set roles. It's one that we've completed for the arborists, for example, where we know we've had no recruitment issues. But yeah, we are trying to get access to a wider benchmark at the moment. And going forward as a company, we're looking at having a review on our own job evaluation system, so that will pick that up company-wide.
Okay. Thank you very much. Right, are there any other questions, comments? Okay, we've got the recommendations. Now that we've come back above the line, we've considered the business plan below the line, we've looked at the scrutiny recommendations. The recommendations as set out on page 227. All those in favour? Thank you very much. Okay. Right, we now move on to the supplementary agenda, which people should have had copies of, and this relates to the repairs and maintenance service provided by Norwich and North Building Limited, and I'm presenting that report. And again, we can't consider the recommendations until we've gone below the line, considered the confidential element of this, and then we'll come back above the line and have discussion, and then go to the recommendations. Right, so what this report relates to, as we transfer in from Norse the maintenance unit, is the issue of a significant backlog of repairs and maintenance works that need to be undertaken. And the purpose of this report is to lay out a strategy about how to respond to that backlog at a time when we're bringing in new elements to Norwich City Services Limited. And I'm just going to run through some of the background to this, starting on page 5. So we have been looking at this emerging issue for a while, and there have been reports to Cabinet through the assurance reports in November 2021, and identified a backlog and a number of repairs that need to be done, and some of the works that were not undertaken. Paragraph 4 outlines the reasons for that backlog, and clearly COVID has played a part. But we have not been able to see a complete improvement from the pre-COVID period. We are at the fag end of a contract, and there are a number of issues in relation to shortages in the labour market and so on, rising costs, etc. Now these are broad issues which affect a number of sectors in the economy. What we want, clearly, is a smoother transition as possible of the building maintenance unit from Norse into the new company from April 1st. Our concern is that a new part of the organisation will be impeded in mobilising and dealing with the current levels of work required in the building maintenance unit if they are hobbled by this backlog of outstanding repairs, void works, whole house improvements, remedial works, etc. The estimation is that it will take 9 months to clear this backlog, and so additional capacity is going to be required for that period. So the City Council is currently working with Eastern Procurement Limited to identify contractors who will be able to take on that work. The criteria against which we will be carrying out that procurement is identified in paragraph 9. The rationale behind appointing 2 contractors is to make sure that we've got a robust support structure in the event of non-performance. So we want to make sure that we have done it, as it were, belt and braces. So the works will be for a number of specific items. If you go to page 7, you will see that that is a sum of about just under £4 million. It is a focused piece of work, as I said, for under a year. The legal implications of that have been worked through. There are some issues relating to where is the focus of the work, and that's going to be largely in relation to tenanted properties. And on page 8, there is a risk register which looks at effectively the implications of not building in that extra capacity. And first and foremost, it's for the tenants and leaseholders who are affected by the fact that there is a backlog in these works. So our first consideration has to be for our tenants and the leaseholders. And we need to make sure that we do this in an effective and speedy way. There are a number of ramifications that if we don't take on this additional capacity to do this work, that it simply compounds a number of problems, and frankly not least one of them is that it will put an undue burden on the company having transferred in this business unit. So we have a tried and tested procurement route for doing this. The reasons are set out from paragraphs 21 to 26 as the rationale for taking this approach. So we can't consider recommendations until we've looked at the below the line item, and I'm proposing now to be below the line so we can discuss those issues in some detail. So if we can go below the line now, Leon, please. And, oh yes, we need to do the exemption. Yeah, sorry about that. So exempting the public. So the public, please indicate. Thank you very much. Okay. just be clear that we're happy with the exempt minutes? Or is it bits? Should we be happy? I suppose. It doesn't need to say so, that's fine. As long as we're happy. Good, everyone's happy. Good. Good, excellent. Right, okay. So we're back above the line. Right, have we got any questions on this? Or observations, cabinet colleagues? No? Okay, Lucy, would you hand up?
Thank you. As you said, first, indeed, the most important of the tenants, and at the present time, as we've heard, many are waiting for basic repairs, and there's also a huge issue around voids that look to 303 predicted by March, which is over £1 million, a huge waiting list for housing at the moment. We need those homes in circulation. So I want to ask, the question is, why weren't extra resources brought in before now on a more regular basis? From outside, it looks like mismanagement on a large scale. Can you explain how it was allowed to clock up to such a number and why red flags weren't raised earlier and additional resources provided, and who's responsible for that?
Okay, Councillor Galvin, you have tested the limits of the courtesy we extend to opposition members, and you know full well that we have fully explored this issue in Scrutiny Committee, in public comments that I have made, that you have made on local media, and this has been thoroughly and exhaustively discussed. So I think on the basis of that you have as full a knowledge as any of us about the challenges that we have faced, the issues that we're tackling, and moving forward with that agenda to make sure that we are achieving compliance and making sure that all our tenants get the service that they deserve. Right. Any more questions? Right, let's go to the recommendation then on page 3 of the report. It's a delegated authority, Executive Director of Community Services, in consultation with myself to make sure that we enter into the appropriate contracts to address the backlog of repairs outstanding, and there's a financial ring around that, which is £3.8 million, and using the City Council's contract procedures and public regulations 2015. And of course we will be ensuring, as part of the procurement exercise we undertake, that it is consistent with our obligations as a real living wage authority, and that those contractors will have to put in a procurement document which includes that and a number of other things that relate to our procurement strategy and policies. Okay, so can I have an indication of those who support that recommendation? Thank you very much, and that concludes today's business.